Hey everyone, it's Laura with BCG Floss Tube. This is a special edition of my floss tube that I'm actually going to be talking about my featherweight, which you can see behind me here. I just wanted to kind of briefly go over our restoration process with you and just let you know how we accomplished what we did. My husband was very instrumental in getting this project off the ground and going for me, and he did a lot of work on it, on the featherweight, and then I took on the case, and it was a lot of work to get the case to where it is too. So I'm going to move this down just a little bit so you can kind of see the case better. There we go. Okay, so my featherweight is a 1947 featherweight. When I got it, it was black, obviously. Most of them were. It was a black featherweight. It did have the Singer decals on it, but they were really kind of worn off. And the machine itself had several nicks and scratches and just some chips in the enamel and things like that. So I had decided that I wanted to get it painted. So my husband, his dad had taken his MGA to a guy here in Columbia, and so I asked my husband kind of jokingly, I said, hey, you think that he would paint my sewing machine for me? And so once I found the sewing machine, he did talk to the guy to see if he would paint it for me, and he agreed to do so. And it just turned out beautifully. Now, we did not try to paint the motor just because we didn't want to have to take it apart and risk messing anything up. The machine was in good working order when I got it, so we went into this project fully aware that we could actually damage the machine, not get it back together, and I would be out of a featherweight unless I could find someone to repair it. But we took that chance. My husband took it apart. He's very mechanically inclined. He can put anything together, really. So he took the machine apart for me, and then took the pieces apart, and we sent them to the auto shop and explained to the guy what we wanted done. He let me pick out a paint chip sample, and he literally opened the cabinet and said, pick what color you want. I knew I wanted a teal color, so I gravitated to those. He helped me kind of narrow it down so I could find the paint chips that were teal, and I chose a paint color chip. And then he and his wife sanded it down for me and painted it. Now, he also polished the brass badge on the front of this, so I did not do that. And he took care of painting the machine. Now, first mistake I made was I ordered the water slide decals from the Featherweight Shop. I thought, I was not reading, it's clearly marked and clearly told on the machine, on the site, but I was thinking they were adhesive, where I could just like take them off and water slide them onto the machine and they would stick. I did not realize that you had to put the clear coat over those decals to keep them on your machine. So that was my first mistake. I tried putting the water slide decals on, and I'm like, these don't seem quite right, and I started reading, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. So if I would want the decals on, because he cleared the machine for me already, if I would have wanted those decals on, I would have had to given those to him and had him do that before he cleared the machine. And they would have been great. But that's okay. Because I came up with my own plan, and it's kind of rolled with it and did my own thing with it. So after we get the machine back, my husband put the majority of the machine together. There were a few things that I fine-tuned in. I did replace the belt with one of the super belts from the Featherweight Shop. Amazing difference in the sewing speed, and you can just hear a difference. The motor is not straining as much because of that super belt, and that's amazing. So I'm glad I did that. I did buy the spool pin adapter so I can use the like the Aurifil thread spools on my machine. Because of the way this thread is wound on that spool, this needs to be laying down instead of standing up, so I did order that attachment for it. I also replaced the presser bar spring. In the presser bar the presser bar shaft that's inside the machine. If you take this plate off, there's a spring that's inside of that. And my machine, I know that's never been replaced because that spring was old and rusty. And what was happening was that my presser foot would not stay down tight against my feed dogs, so my fabric wasn't feeding in correctly. So I replaced that spring, which was very easy and quick to do, and resolved that issue. I also bought their presser foot alignment tool, which was amazing because it helped me get my presser foot aligned on the machine so quickly and easily without having to, adjust it 10 times and turning the bar a little bit when we were putting it back together. So those things were great. I did also purchase the bobbin tension gauge. I didn't have any issues with my tension though, so I have not used that. I probably will check it at some point, but I haven't used it. I didn't need to on my machine. So, like I said, the water slide decals, they are not adhesive, so I had to come up with a different plan because my machine had already been clear coated and it was back together. So I didn't want to have to take it back apart and send it back to the auto shop to have them clear over my decals. So I have a Cricut maker. I decided that, it's a custom machine. They made 30,000 of them on this birthday of my machine. So I decided that, it was already painted, so I might as well just go all in and do a custom design. So what I ended up doing with my Cricut was I cut black vinyl decals out of permanent vinyl, and I put roses on my machine. And I have a little filigree going up by the hand wheel. And then I also cut out the lettering for the back. And then if you can see inside of here, there we go. I have roses going up the throat of the machine as well. Now, do I think that these decals are going to hold up 20 years? Maybe not. They'll probably hold up for a while. But if that vinyl starts messing up, I have the files saved. I can cut them out again with my Cricut. I can get them off of the machine. I can replace them. So I'm not worried about that because I have the tools and the means to replace them if I need to. Okay, so that's the machine. And I was trying to think if the only other thing that I did, and I got this from the Featherweight Shop as well, is I replaced the light bulb with an LED light bulb. And it doesn't get hot. And it's really bright, and I like both of those things. I do have the original Bakelite foot pedal for my machine. It came with it, but I wanted the electronic foot pedal. So I ordered this from the Featherweight Shop, and then we had them paint the top of it, but not the bottom. So we took just the top off, and he did some additive with the paint so it would stick to the plastic, and painted the presser foot to match my machine. So I kind of went with a teal and black theme, and I kind of carried that through with the case. So I posted the case yesterday in a few of the groups, and this is August 18th. So I posted some pictures on my Instagram last night, and I also posted some pictures in a Facebook group and on my Facebook page yesterday of the case. And I had lots of questions and lots of inquiries, and I promised I would do a little kind of a video to tell you what I did, how I got to where I am with my case. Now, my case, when I got it, stank. I can't even describe the level of stink that it had. And I know that a lot of it was, age. I know that the animal byproducts they use in the glue stink after a while. I really feel like it was, some mildew and some mold, and just, it was stinky. And I tried the wax and feed, which I don't remember. It's a Howard's, I believe, Howard's wax and feed method, where you take that and you wipe down the whole exterior and interior of the box, and you get a good coating on there. I tried that. I sat it out in the sun for a few days. I ordered the case deodorizer from the Featherweight Shop. I tried probably 4 or 5 different things before I was like, okay, I give up on this case. I'm either going to strip it down and redo it, or I'm going to have to trash it and buy a reproduction. So to me, it was worth it because, you know, the case itself, it stank, and I wasn't going to use it the way it was. And the outside covering wasn't in great condition. It was okay condition, but not great condition. So to me, it was worth it to take the chance. Now, I will tell you that I took some shortcuts with the case that I'm perfectly fine with, because I did this for myself. This is for me, and it has to meet my expectations and my standards, and I'm okay with cutting a few corners. Now, would I do this for someone else and say, here you go? Probably not. I'd probably take it a little further and do a few extra things for someone else's case if I was going to charge them to do it. But again, like I said, this is for me, and I don't see myself getting into case restoration because it was a lot of work. So I'm going to try to start inserting some pictures here as we go along. The first thing I did with this case, like I said, it had that black covering. So the first thing I did was I took all the black covering off. And you can see that here. What I was left with was raw wood that had this black gunk all over it. And it wasn't gooey. It wasn't like it was sticky or anything, but I know it was the adhesive, that old glue that was on that raw wood. So that's where I was at with the first, after I got all the black covering off. Now, what I did around the latches, these, and also what I did inside around the foot bevel plate was I cut it. I used an X-Acto knife, a very sharp new blade, and I just cut that black cloth out of there and pulled out as much as I could. I also used some weeding tools that I have with my Cricut to kind of pick and pull out all those extra little threads that came that would, you know, kind of get stuck in things in places. And it took a while to get all of that off. I probably spent 3 or 4 hours just getting the fabric off of the case and cleaning up around the latches and the just different little hardware pieces on the case. Same thing with the handle. Now, I did not remove any of my hardware. I've seen videos, I've seen tutorials of people that have, and that's awesome if you want to do that. I didn't want to have to go through the process of drilling out all those rivets and then getting them back on and hoping I got them on there right and making sure they were still secure and all of that. Not to mention, I wasn't really sure what the wood was going to look like when I got all that fabric off of my case. So I was kind of taking a few shortcuts just because I was like, well, you know, I could get down to bare wood and it just be trash. And that is the risk you run. Because a lot of these old cases, that fabric could be very well what's holding it together. And what I learned with my case was that the bottom of my case, that fabric was definitely what was holding it together. It had just really dried out in all of the joints. So after I got the fabric off, the next step was to get all that glue off. I cannot believe this worked, but I found a blog post, I believe it was on the Featherweight Shop. It could have been a YouTube video. I watched so much and I read so much. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly where I saw everything and read everything. I used a microfiber rag and a bowl of vinegar. I just poured vinegar into a bowl, I sopped my rag, and I started sponging it onto like one side of the case at a time. Let it sit around 5 minutes. Used a metal scraper and a paint scraper and literally just slid that scraper across the wood, and all that glue just like came right up and off of that wood. I would not have believed that would have worked if I wouldn't have seen it. And in fact, when I started doing that process, I'm like, this is not gonna work. And I was doing it in my craft room. Do this outside. And in fact, the fabric, remove the fabric outside or in a workshop or someplace not inside your house where it's nice. Because when you start ripping that fabric off, those like little black particles of old fabric start flying everywhere. It was a mess. It was a mess. So do this outside, do this in the garage, do this in the workshop, do it someplace not in a good area of your house. If you don't have any other choice, put down a lot of newspaper or a tarp or something, because it's going to make a mess. Okay, so then you have vinegar and it's gonna stink. Do that outside if at all possible too. So I used vinegar on the outside and the inside, everywhere, all over the case. Like I said, I just mopped it on with a microfiber towel, scraped it all off with that paint scraper, and it really did just come right off. And you can see some pictures of the before and after here. Okay, so now you've got the wood clean, and you really need to, I went over this, I got everything off that I could see, and then I once again used that microfiber cloth, sopped it in vinegar, and wiped it all over the wood again to get any residue that could possibly be on there. You want to make sure you get that wood as clean as possible. Now, at that point, I realized, wow, my case is in decent condition. Not great, but decent. So the joints, you have dovetail joints on the corners, those were all loose. Like I said, the bottom of this case was very loose. I had a split in a board on the bottom of the case as well. So after the wood completely dried out from all the vinegar that I used, I mean, I would probably say I used probably a quart of vinegar on it. After it dried out from all the vinegar, then I used wood glue and started gluing the joints all back together. Now, my problem was I don't really have like woodworking tools. I don't have wood clamps. So I had to be creative with what I was going to do to hold this together, because you want it to be held together tight. One of the obstacles that I faced was that when I used all that vinegar on that old dry wood, the back of my case was bowing a little bit. It was bowing out. So I needed to get something around it that I could secure it down and tighten it down so it would fit the base of my case once more. So I decided I would use tie-down straps like you use to tie something down on the back of your truck, right? So my husband brought me a couple tie-downs, and the first thing I did was I did all the corners. So I did all the corners of the case, wrapped the straps around the case, around those corners, cinched them down, and let it sit for like half a day. Now the wood glue that I was using, it was just Elmer's wood glue. It said after an hour that you're okay, that it should be, you know, it has a good bond. 24 hours for complete bonding, but at an hour you were okay to, you know, proceed basically. So that's what I did. I waited a few hours. I mean, I didn't go 1 hour, but I waited a few hours. So then after I had the sides, then I wrapped the case. I glued the bottom and wrapped the case the other way, cinched those straps down, which you can see here, and held it together. And I left that for probably 6 hours or so, and just left it. So then after all of that was dry, I took the straps off, realized I got some glue that was like on the wood, and it kind of got on the straps, and it left a cute little like basket weave pattern of glue on my case, so I sanded it. So after I got it glued back together, then I just did a hand sanding. I did not get out a fancy tool or anything. I didn't go buy myself a sander. I don't have an orbital sander. I didn't use a Dremel. I just got some good old sandpaper and some good old elbow grease and muscle power, and went to town sanding all of the sides of the case, because I knew that, you know, this was for me, and I was okay with the wood not being perfectly smooth. So what I did was I just sanded it as good as I could. I started with like a 120 grit, I believe, or maybe an 80 grit. Then I went with a 120, and then I went with a 220. Sanded all the sides, the bottom, the top, the inside of the lid, everywhere that I knew that I was going to paint. So sanding, sand. After I got done sanding, I used a microfiber rag and some mineral spirits and wiped everything down. And this is very important. You want to make sure you wipe it down with the mineral spirits, because not only do you want to get all the dirt off of it, you want to get all the oils from your fingers from you touching it and sanding it and everything, and all the vinegar and all of that. You want to make sure all that's off before you put any paint on it. So I used, like I said, a microfiber towel just with some mineral spirits outside and wiped everything down on the case. Okay, so that's all the prep work. Excuse me. Okay, so then all the prep work was done. It was time to like redo my case at this point. So the first thing I did was I did 3 coats of primer. The primer that I used was an automotive primer because I talked to the guy that painted my sewing machine and got the paint code from him. We went to O'Reilly's and had them mix a spray can of the auto paint that he used on my machine for my case. That paint, you can use it on wood, metal, and plastic. So I was confident that it would be fine to use it on my case. The primer that my husband got me was also in the same line, and it was a sandable primer, and it was a buildable sandable primer. So what that means was that if I had any like little imperfections in my case, we're not talking big gouges, but little imperfections in my case, it like self levels and it would fill in those spots. Now I used an entire can of primer on my case. I put 3 coats of primer on my Featherweight case, and I did spray the inside of the lid and the inside of the case with the primer. Now lightly, the inside of the case with the primer. I wasn't too concerned about that, and I'll show you that. I'll show you why in a minute. So I primed it and I let it sit overnight. The coats of primer, they dried in probably about 10 minutes each. So it was a really fast process. There were a couple spots that I wanted to sand. So after the second coat of primer, I sanded down a little bit, and then I put that 3rd coat of primer on. Let it sit overnight just to make sure. And, I was looking at the paint and it was like, this is the temperature it should be at. And it was a little warmer than it should be that day. So I waited until the next morning, went out and I painted the case. Now the paint has a metallic in it. So you have to make sure you keep shaking while you're spraying. So I sprayed the sides and the top of the case. I opened the lid, sprayed the inside of the lid, and let it sit. Came back later, probably half an hour is what I would say, because it was drying pretty quickly too. Turned it over, sprayed the bottom. Came back half an hour later, turned it back, sprayed the sides and the inside of the case again. So it was, it was a process. I put 2 coats of paint on it. Then I had to sand a little bit because I had a few little runs that I didn't notice. And actually, I think there were runs in the primer, not the paint. I didn't notice until I put that metallic on there. And then it was like, hello, you have runs. So sanded those down, sprayed that spot again. Oh, the other thing is I taped off all of my hardware. Before I did the primer, I taped off all of the hardware with just like some blue painter's tape. And I figured that I could scrape off any of the paint residue if it got on it, if it got under the tape or anything. And I was able to do that because I did have a little bit of paint on the hardware. Okay, so painting was done. And then that was Saturday. So then on Sunday morning, because the clear specifically said 55 to 75 degrees, over 75 degrees, it might dry too fast. And so you'd have dry spots, where it wouldn't be as shiny in your clear coat. So I had to wait till Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, under a shade tree and sprayed the clear. Now I did all of this outside under a shade tree because these paints are very fragrant. And it clearly tells you, make sure you're outside, well ventilated area. And so for me, it made the most sense just to go outside with it. And I wasn't worried about little specks of dirt or anything. If it gets a couple specks of dirt in it or something, then it's fine. I was fine with it. Okay, so I sprayed my clear and it dried in probably a couple hours. After that, took all the tape off of it and cleaned up the hardware. So that's where I was at with that. Okay, then came the fun part. I noticed that my case fell off the table when it was outside. Not while I was there, but when I left. We had a little bit of wind that day. I could not believe that this happened. The case without the machine in it and any of the hardware or any of the stuff in it is not very heavy. They're very light cases. I did not think that our little breeze that day would knock it off the table, but it did. Knocked it off onto the ground. And when that happened, I believe that's when it happened. I had like a little crack. And it's not all the way through, but it was a little crack in the wood. And I was like, okay, well, that's going to be part of my design then, isn't it? So I cut out with, again, the black permanent vinyl with my Cricut Maker, cut out the black border, and then I can only cut 12 inches. at a time with my Cricut. Well, I can cut more than that, but I didn't have the right stuff to do that. So I was cutting out basically 11.5 inches of this border at a time. So what I did was I met them in the middle on the front and the sides of the case. And I knew I wanted to put roses on it anyway, so it would match the machine. So what I did was the border meets in the middle here, and then I put this silver scallop circle and a black rose in the middle on each side of the case, and press that down. And it's really secure. I mean, you can obviously feel the edge because it's, it's vinyl on top of painted wood, but it's very secure, and I really feel like it's going to hold up. The other thing I did was I cut out this little monogram up here that has an L, and because I named my Featherweight Lucinda Rose after my great grandma's middle name, and the roses on the machine. And my first name is Laura, so either way you want to go with it, there's an L in the box. So that's what I did to decorate the outside of the box. Now the inside of the box is where a lot of people are asking questions and want to know how I did it and what, how to do it. And I'm just going to tell you to have a lot of patience. So this is what the inside of the case looks like. So I made these panels, and this is Riley Blake's My Happy Place by Lori Holt home decorator fabric. This is not just cotton fabric, it's home dec fabric. So it's a little thicker, a little more durable. I wanted the inside of my box a little cushioned because if I put my Featherweight in this to take to retreat or something, I want to make sure that it's safe, right? So like I said, I painted about, I would say I painted probably 3 inches down on the sides inside of this case. Let me get a few of these things out of here. I painted like probably 2 or 3 inches down because I knew I was putting these panels in there, so I wasn't really concerned about painting the entire inside of the case. There's no reason for that. The other thing I noticed after I got all of this painted, it still kind of smelled, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I went and got Kills paint and brushed inside of the case 3 coats of Kills paint inside of my case. So if I take these panels out, which I can slip one of them out, you can see that I have Kills painted up to about probably 2 inches to the top. And you'll notice that I just slipped this panel out. So this panel, inside of this, you can't see inside of it. Inside of this is just some balsa wood. I have balsa wood for my Cricut Maker because it cuts wood things out. But it's real thin. It's probably 1/8 of an inch thick, I think. It might be a 1/16. I think it's 1/8 of an inch thick. And then what I did was, so I measured my case and I cut my balsa wood. And you can see here, it's in there. It's not cardboard, and it's not cardstock, and it's not chipboard, and it's not paper. It's balsa wood inside of this. And then I laid the piece of balsa wood down on the home dec fabric and added 1/2 inch seam allowance around the sides. And then at the bottom, I left probably about 1 inch down there. So I sewed the sides and the tops, left the bottom open, slipped when I had a layer of batting, quilt batting, just cotton quilt batting, and then the 2 layers of home dec fabric, so it's covered on both sides. It's a really nice finish. Slid the balsa wood inside, and then I just tucked in the bottom edges, and I just hot glued them down. I mean, I could have whip stitched them shut, but I just didn't feel like I needed to do that at this point. So I just hot glued them down to the bottom. And then these just slip into my case, and they do fit very snugly. They're not going anywhere. I didn't glue them because if they get dirty or I want to change them or I need to take them out for some reason, then I'm not fighting with glue or any kind of other adhesive or however I decided to mount them in there. I don't have to worry about any of that. They just slide right out. Same thing with the bottom. Now the bottom does not have a layer of cotton batting on it. It does have the double-sided decorator fabric though. So that's how I did those. Just measure, measure your case. Cut your balsa wood. I will say that the balsa wood and the fabric and the batting does add a little, thickness, I guess, to the wall. So these end pieces, when you measure the inside of your case, I think they're about 3/8 less. And what I would suggest is get your side panels done and put them in there, and then do a second measurement before you do that final, cut with your balsa wood and fabric. I didn't do that because I was kind of winging it as I went. And so I ended up taking those end pieces apart, cutting on the balsa wood, sewing down the piece, putting it back together, and then hot gluing them again. Okay, so after I got all of that done, all the pieces inside the box, then I put the little bobbin caddy and the tool caddy back in, and the oil can holder back in. Now the panel on this end, because my case doesn't have that tray that drops into the top. It has the one on the end, right? So the panel on this end, I accounted for that, and that panel is that much shorter. It does not go behind this case. Now my front panel does go all the way to the corner, which did pose a problem when I started to put my bobbin caddy back in, because when I did that, I can't get the screw that goes into the front here. So I have the 2 screws on the sides, but not the one that goes into the front. But again, I'm okay with it. It's not gonna, I'm gonna use this case when I go to retreat. My machine's not gonna live in this case, and it's not something, and I'm definitely not gonna carry it around by its handle or anything. I have another canvas tote that I'll put this case into in order to carry it in someplace, because I'm not gonna trust this handle in this case to support my machine. Now, with that being said, it's very sound. And it's not like it's not falling apart. I feel like the wood glue and everything has really secured it well. And it's structurally good, but it's old wood and it's an old case. And if you have a featherweight and you know anything about them, you know that you do not carry them by the handle of these cases, because so many of them, this old Bakelite has broken, or the hardware is broken off, or, the bottom's fallen out. Things have happened. Things have gone wrong. So you don't want to do that. Don't take chances with your featherweight. So that's kind of the overview of how I did it. I'll list the products below that I used in the restoration process of the case, and a few links to like the Cricut Maker and the vinyl and things like that I used if you're interested. If you have comments, please, or questions, please put them down below, and I will respond to them as soon as I can. Yeah, and share this out with your friends. If someone's looking to redo their featherweight case, this might be a good way for them to get the look they want. You could use any fabric you wanted. I used home dec fabric because I felt like I wanted a little thicker fabric in there. I also used that batting because I wanted to make sure that it was kind of cushy for my featherweight. But the old cases didn't have batting in there. Oh, the other thing. Oh, this is like the best thing ever. So I made this little bumper pad because my case did not have, the featherweight cases are supposed to have like a little block down here that keeps your machine from sliding down to that end of the box when you're moving it around. I didn't have that. The nails were there, so it was there at some point in time, but there was no block or bumper or anything down there. So what I did was I used Pellon foam, and I'll put what I used in the description box below. And I rolled it up really tight. I actually rolled it up around a pencil so I could get it real tight to begin with, and took the pencil out. Rolled up a piece of foam really tight, measured my fabric around it, and I sewed this, and then used fabric glue to kind of punch in the ends. So I have a really pretty good foam roll that fits into the end of my box for a bumper. And it just fits right in there. So then my machine can be in there, and I know it's safe and it's not going to slide. Now, a couple other things I need to make for my machine yet is I want to make that extension table cover that covers this, so when this is flipped up it won't scratch against the screw on the faceplate. And I also want to make a custom, just a bed protector, so when I put it in my case when I'm traveling or something, if something does happen to fall down there or something, it doesn't scratch up my machine. So a couple of little projects, of course, and that's part of it. That's part of the fun, right? Just this is kind of what I decided when I went into this, is that this was going to be a custom machine. They made a bunch of them. It wasn't in great condition, so I don't feel like I ruined a mint condition featherweight or anything like that. And making it custom, making it something that I want, that I like. So, because it's for me. So have fun with it. If you have a featherweight that you've been interested in getting painted, there are definitely people out there that will paint them for you. Have fun with it. They made thousands and thousands and thousands of them, so it's not like you're taking a super rare item and destroying it. And at the end of the day, I feel like there's definitely a couple different schools of thought, but at the end of the day, I feel like I took a machine that didn't look very good cosmetically, worked great mechanically, but didn't look very good cosmetically, and turned it into something that I love, and it's for me, and it's mine. Lucinda Rose will be with me for a very long time, if not until I die, So it's been a great experience, and I really have enjoyed learning more about them and learning more about how the cases are put together. And it was also very rewarding just to know that I was able to do it. I didn't have to, give up halfway or anything. So I encourage you to try it. I obviously, if you have a case that's in mint condition, why? Mine, like I said, it stank really bad. It was either try to fix it or toss it, because I wasn't going to use it in the condition that it was in. So if you have a case that structurally is in good condition, but maybe it stinks a little bit, or maybe cosmetically it doesn't look very good, give it a try. Worst case, you have to buy a reproduction case, that's kind of that's the mindset that I had when I entered into this project. So that's what I encourage you to do too. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. You can follow me on Instagram at LauraB3677. I post lots of pictures about the quilts and cross stitch that I'm working on. I usually have a regularly scheduled floss tube every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, about every 2 weeks. I'm trying to get a little more frequent than that, but we'll see how that goes. And I'd be happy to help you out any way I can. Talk to you later.